Okay, Neil Falcher, welcome to Irish Granny Tarot. It's time for our Saturday book, and we are on our third and I do believe final weekend of covering The Incredible Life and Mysterious Death of Dorothy Kilgallen by Sara Jordan-Heintz. And I have a wonderful conversation with the author that I'll be uploading in the next couple of days. So we are on our fifth video, and we'll see what kind of progress we can make. Let's just get right into it. When last we left the JFK assassination, because that's what we were talking about, we were covering the fact that the Secret Service agent who blew the whistle on the Secret Service investigation's failure was arrested with fake bribery charges. He was convicted, and witnesses later admitted lying to make the conviction. He served several years in federal prison, but he was Biden's first pardon of 2022, and he was freed. They got another tip. Now we're talking about conspiracies, what might happen, in association with threats to the president. They got another tip that led to the arrest of a guy called Thomas Valley. He was a John Bircher. Someday I should do a video just on the John Birch Society. Very right wing. Think Barry Goldwater. He was caught with weapons and ammunition, so something was up, and he had a very a biography somewhat similar to Oswald, the kind of perfect for a frame-up. So I guess there's doubt as to what he was really up to, or did he get set up? But because of this particular threat, Kennedy took it seriously and canceled his trip to Chicago. This is before he went to Dallas, of course, but it's within the same time period is what I mean. There was news about Vietnam and about him conferring with top officials. So there was some rumor in the mill that maybe the United States and Vietnam were trying to come to an agreement of some sort behind the scenes. At this time, particularly the South Vietnamese president and his brother were murdered, and it was a CIA coup attempt. JFK had said no. He did not sanction this, so tension between the president and the CIA. Hunt, I'm assuming E. Howard Hunt, and not to be confused with Hunt, the billionaire oil man from Texas. Hunt later admitted faking cables. Remember cables? Like telegrams, sort of, to implicate JFK in the murder of these two men in South Vietnam. The question arose, did they hope that Kennedy's assassination in Chicago on the same day that the Vietnamese president and his brother were killed would be associated, called retribution, take the heat off the real perpetrators? There was the feeling, this is really 17-dimensional chess. Nobody was charged, and the fact that nobody was charged really does support the theory that the U.S. intelligence agencies were involved in this political assassination in South Vietnam. Then there was a Tampa plot on November 18th of 1963 that was stopped by increasing security to more than 600 when he went to Tampa. Also at Miami at the same day, which they avoided the threat by using a helicopter to get around instead of going by limo. All this leading people with a little common sense to say, look, it's highly unlikely that Oswald was a lone nut. Kennedy was methodically stalked city to city. People were really planning things in every city he went to. Secret Service knew about it, and therefore there was a rollback of security in Dallas that is quite suspicious. That's incriminating. Dorothy Kilgallen went to Dallas for the trial of Jack Ruby, and he asked to talk to her. And they had a private conversation. I don't know how much of an interview or maybe like interrogation it was, but she had a private conversation with him, and he asked to have her come back. That was planned to have a second conversation. She described Ruby as very nervous about his own well-being. She said that it was extremely stressful in this courtroom. For one thing, it was overheated and very crowded. The first juror that was interviewed about it said it was frightening. All the jurors were fully exposed in the media. This should all start to sound eerily familiar. And during Ruby's trial, 7 prisoners escaped the courthouse with a fake gun that was made out of soap and boot black put on it to make it look like a real gun. So this is brought up, has nothing to do with the Kennedy assassination. It's just kind of an indication of the quality of security in the courthouse. The press was subject to intense searching and scrutiny, and she always felt like this was retribution. You liberals from the North in the press, the media, the fake media coming down. I don't believe that, YouTube. I'm quoting these crazy people. Kilgallen reported that Ruby and Oswald associated with each other and that Oswald died not by being shot, actually. I mean, yes, he was shot, but the surgery was bungled, kind of implying. Kilgallen had a private 10-minute talk with Ruby that first time. And, actually, it wasn't completely private. His attorney was there. It was a sincere discussion. And she didn't report on what was said because she was saving it for her book. The notes disappeared, which we'll get to. She asked Ruby to write his thoughts. He wrote 10 pages, and they were smuggled out of the jail. They implicated LBJ. They put Oswald in position for to be at the scene for Ruby to shoot. So Ruby was admitting to a lot there. And Ruby told her, now this is all the words of Jack Ruby. These are not my words. This is the words of Jack Ruby, that LBJ was the only one who had really had something to gain from all of this. I mean, really something substantial to gain. There were people who hated Kennedy, but LBJ had something to gain. Castro and Russia did not, because this would create worse global hostilities, and they couldn't risk that. Who got Oswald to work at that depository? That's an unanswered question, because it set Oswald up to look like the crazy guy. Ruby said that he was framed to kill Oswald. He said it was a clever trick. Ruby recommended that they look into LBJ. He told Kilgallen, look into LBJ and how he fooled anybody. He said, if Kennedy had chosen Adlai Stevenson, to be his vice president, which a lot of people thought he should have done, he would never have been shot. This was LBJ, it was the engineer. This is alleged. Jack Ruby said this. Ruby was convicted, and he got the chair. He got the death penalty. Kilgallen said that the truth has never been told about all of this. Belli, the lawyer, called it a kangaroo court. He was infuriated about the way that Ruby's trial went. He said later that the trial had taken place, it was a kangaroo court. He noted trial judge Joe Brown made frequent uses of the spittoon. Jurymen smoked cigars during the trial, and the judge and another courtroom official called each other Joe during the trial. He commented, "You don't have to know much law to be a judge in Texas." He complained, "Not a single motion or move we made was sustained." Belli said he cited a long list of Texas cases which he believed would make Ruby eligible for bail, but when he confronted the judge with the citations, Belli said Judge Brown responded, I can't repeat this, it's a racial slur. He told him, "Don't cite those cases, Mr. Belli. They're all cases." Lovely. Belli also bemoaned the lack of diversity on the jury, pointing out that 172 of the 178 on the potential jurors list were Southern Baptist, and all 12 of those picked were Southern Baptists. Yeah, he didn't have a real high opinion. October of 66, the appeals court overturned the case on a change of venue ruling. The new trial was scheduled for February of 67, but Ruby died in January. He ostensibly died of cancer, but he claimed that he was injected with something that gave him cancer. And in December of 2022, National Health Archives were released. The documents showed that the psychiatrist who was sent into Ruby's jail cell was Louis West, a CIA MK-Ultra psychiatrist who worked on mind control experiments with LSD earlier with, MK-Ultra. And that he was Ruby's psychiatrist. After he visited Ruby's cell, Ruby died. He also was the psychiatrist for Sirhan. Kilgallen wrote about the Texas millionaires' support from Goldwater. I brought his name up, supporting LBJ, who hated Kennedy, and knew that LBJ would play ball, that they dangled that carrot of the presidency. Dorothy Kilgallen was one of the only journalists to discuss the Kennedy camp's break with LBJ. Teddy Kennedy and Robert Kennedy Jr., Sr., the dad, JFK's brother, were very popular. Dorothy Kilgallen would not leave the topic of November 22nd alone, the assassination. She discussed the Oswald escape route. She said it was circuitous and odd and did not fit into this official time frame. The cop that died, J.D. Tippit, was shot. Was he shot to shut him up? A witness said there were two people who shot him and they weren't Oswald. Was his job going to be to stop Oswald? Was Oswald told to meet somebody, we don't know who, at the theater so that they could send Tippit to kill Oswald, send somebody to kill Tippit? It's all cleaned up, no witnesses. Oswald got accused of the whole thing. He was found in the theater because the shooting of the cop was being investigated ostensibly, but that's not really why. Why would he be sitting in the theater? Why would he go there? Why would Tippit stop there? Why would witnesses say that Oswald looked calm, cooled, and puzzled in the cafeteria of the depository seconds after the shooting? As in, not out of breath from running down 5 stories to get to the cafeteria to casually be in the middle of his lunch. Seconds after the shooting. What would be the reason for Oswald to shoot the cop? Because he didn't. The witnesses who saw it said 2 guys did it and it wasn't Oswald. So that whole story is suspect. After the arrest of Oswald, he was calm. He was mad at being manhandled by the Dallas police, and he was mad at being arrested because he couldn't figure out why he was being arrested. Tippit was a World War II veteran with PTSD. He had a lot of friends in the John Birch Society. He admired JFK. He had just learned Spanish, and he was really good at it. I don't know why that's important. He had gone home for lunch, and when he was at lunch, he told his wife, that one nut might try to do something to Kennedy. Interesting comment. So let's look at the quote I have here for us. The Tippit's oldest boy, Alan, who was 13, had faked being sick at school so he could avoid taking a test. And A+ for smarts, huh? And he was home when his father arrived for lunch. Before leaving, Tippit hugged his son and said, "No matter what happens today, I want you to know that I love you." This was something uncharacteristic for Tippit to do, although he was a doting father. Odd. Also, other cops sent to Dealey Plaza. This other cop that was sent claims that federal agents borrowed recordings of the cop communication that day. Okay, so there weren't a lot of cops actually with the motorcade in the crowd on foot. They'd all been pulled back that morning. There were a few motorcycle cops, and there was communication by radio, which was kept recorded someplace, and some federal agent came in and took him. His communication to and from headquarters was spotty all day long. Like he'd try to get in touch and all of a sudden he couldn't, or they'd communicate and all of a sudden they couldn't. He got no reply when he would call in. Very unusual, he said. They claimed they didn't hear him. Oswald's landlady saw Oswald getting on a bus, and the bus was going in the opposite direction of where he ordinarily would go. And it was in the same direction that Tippit took off in. Eyewitness reports happened of Tippit behaving oddly. He was in the wrong place. If he was supposed to be on his patrol, his usual patrol, he was in the wrong place. He was on public phones. He was rushing about, not using his car radio. The big question is, why was Tippit shot? And maybe it was to make Oswald a scapegoat for any murder in case Kennedy charges didn't stick. I don't know. I think they were just cleaning up all the eyewitnesses. That would be my theory. Tippit was sent in to shoot Oswald. Oswald got arrested. Oswald got caught, and they short on the heels. It was happening at the same time, where the whistle's been blown. The lights went on in the theater, in the main part of the theater. They started looking at the people in the seats, trying to find Oswald, and Tippit got shot shortly before that. So I think they were Tippit didn't kill Oswald like he was supposed to, and they cleaned up him. Now they're stuck with Oswald, and we know what happened the next day. The forensics of the Tippit killing conflict with eyewitnesses. We've already talked about that. 2 people saw him being shot. People saw 2 people shooting him, and neither of those 2 people was Oswald. His body was removed from the scene of the shooting before the cops even arrived. Okay. Dallas broadcasts on the radio and the television at that time are in conflict too with what was going on. For example, a shooter drove off in a car. Shells were found for an automatic. This was not Oswald's gun. He didn't have an automatic. So Oswald didn't shoot at Tippit. That's another bit of evidence. The ballistics agree. Didn't come from Oswald's gun. The killer left a jacket behind at Oswald's murder. Not Oswald. At Tippit's murder. Not Oswald's jacket. Later, they actually found the real jacket that really did belong to Oswald up on the 6th floor depository. Okay. The movie arrest itself, as I said, was really bizarre. 23-year-old John Brewster was an eyewitness. Supposedly, he saw that the theater cashier was pressured to call the cops on a strange man who didn't have a ticket in the theater. Who is this 23-year-old? He, not the cashier, supposedly saw this guy go in without a ticket. This young guy who made this accusation and told the cashier, call the cops, there's a guy in there without a ticket, was a close personal friend of Jack Ruby's. You have to believe at that young of an age, he was probably a business associate of sorts. It's hard to believe that the cops would care that there was a guy in a theater without a ticket while the president's shot down there on the other side of town. It seemed like that wouldn't matter so much. Interesting little fact here that you don't hear very often. The local radio broadcast simultaneously at the time that they're calling the cops because there's a guy without a ticket in the theater. A local radio program broadcast the shooter of the president is in the theater, and more than 2,000 people arrived on the scene of the theater. That's just mind-boggling. However, a concession operator inside the theater swore that Oswald came in 2.5 hours earlier. I'm sorry, not 2.5, half an hour earlier, when the cartoon was starting, that he had already been there for quite some time, half an hour earlier, when the cartoon was starting, and other patrons in the theater said they saw Oswald sit and then get up and move and sit next to somebody else, and get up and move and sit next to somebody else as the show was starting. And he also got up and sat next to this patron. If Oswald was already there, who or why? What was the report of the guy sneaking in? I mean, this guy, let me make it really clear. This 23-year-old friend of Jack Ruby suddenly comes to the cashier sitting out front in the booth at the theater and says, call the cops. I just saw a guy sneak in without a ticket. So Oswald had already been there for more than half an hour. Very weird. The cashier left town to avoid questioning. And years later, when she was tracked down, she cried because she burst into tears when she was asked if she sold Oswald a ticket. And she said, yes, she had. He went in half an hour before everybody said, and half an hour before Ruby's friend told her to call the cops. Oswald was seen by a number of other witnesses in the theater, changing seats over and over. He kept sitting next to people and then moving if the person didn't react to his presence. And it was not a full theater by any means. Was he trying to meet somebody and he was trying to find out who it was, like he didn't recognize visually? He was trying to figure out, which person in the theater was his contact? Seems like it. Usually, an intelligence contact will reveal himself with a signal, like a torn piece of cash, like a dollar bill torn in half, or a box top that's been torn in half. And when Oswald was arrested, in his pocket, he had a torn box top in his pocket. Cops surrounded the theater. They claimed that Oswald tried to shoot his way out. He never did. Witnesses in the theater said that he refused to resist. Even when the cops showed up where he was sitting and started punching him, he shouted over and over, I'm not resisting arrest. I'm not resisting arrest. And there's all kinds of eyewitnesses who, under oath, testified to this. Cops made a huge attempt to frame Oswald. They claimed he was shooting at them. They claimed there was a wild struggle and a shootout. They claimed that he shouted, I killed me a president and a cop. Now all I need is 2 more. But all these witnesses watching the movie, sitting in the theater, can you imagine? They were absolutely shocked. Because that was not what happened. Not so. He did not resist arrest, and he claimed, I'm not resisting. Eyewitnesses said that all of this that the cops said was nonsense. And Oswald kept telling the cops, I did not kill anybody. What do you mean? I'm not resisting. Go ahead, arrest me. I didn't kill anybody. One eyewitness outside saw 2 cop cars go into an alley and take a man out the back door of the theater and sneak him off. Oswald was taken out the front door. A wallet was planted at Tippit's scene. Oswald had his own wallet when he was arrested. It wasn't Oswald's wallet. The fake wallet had Oswald's information, his driver's license. He didn't know how to drive. He didn't have a driver's license. He had no car. He took the bus, and he had his own wallet in his pocket. He did not have a driver's license, but somehow, mysteriously, his driver's license showed up at the scene of Tippit's shooting. In this wallet, there were forged draft cards to Alex J. Hiddell and a different selective service card than Oswald had. And it had Oswald's picture on it, but it wasn't Oswald's because he had his own draft cards. The next day, the cops claimed that the rifle that was used was purchased by an Alex Hiddell, and it went to Oswald's P.O. box. This is all stuff you don't hear an enormous amount about. You start putting all of these things together, and you just have to wonder what the heck was going on. Okay, his fingerprints were not on the draft card or the driver's license. There was no evidence of him actually having it existing. The money order for the rifle was never used or deposited. They don't know. Supposedly this money order that was purchased was never used. The money order was bought at a time when Oswald was actually at work and would not have been at the bank. And the post office box could be accessed by anyone without ID. If you had a key or maybe it was a combination, I don't know. But anybody, you didn't have to prove you were to get into this box. And then I have another little tidbit here. Sergeant Hill said that on the way downtown with the other cops, Lee Oswald seemed bewildered and commented, "I don't know why you're treating me like this. The only crime I've committed is carrying a pistol into a movie house." Just before they got to the police headquarters, Oswald was told that there were a lot of reporters waiting, and if he wanted to duck down, they would help him cover his face. And his answer was, "Why would I hide my face? I haven't done anything I'm ashamed of." He was completely not knowing what was going on. In the police station, the captain already knew all about Oswald's background, like huge detail, in the Marines, in Russia, with Cuba. And he left Dallas and joined the CIA later. And the big question is, what? Are you serious? He was 45. He had been in charge of the Dallas Police Department and the Personnel Department. But he had never been, not the whole police department, the personnel department, he had never been part of the homicide squad. So why was he even involved in this? But he was very involved in the post-assassination police work. He's the one who found the jacket at Tippit's death and the wallet at Tippit's death scene. So who was this guy? Oswald, an Oswald lookalike, was seen in a car hiding because police were all over the theater, but around the neighborhood. But at the time eyewitnesses saw the guy, Oswald had already been arrested. So who is the guy hiding in the police car who looked like Oswald? Oswald was already on his way to the station. The car plates that this guy, okay, he wasn't in a police car, he was in another car, and the car plates belonged to a friend of Tippit's, a guy called Mathers. The guy was a radio mechanic. He worked at Fort Collins, and he worked on LBJ's plane, and he worked with NASA, which contracted with the CIA. And this is the car that the pretend Oswald lookalike was spotted by many eyewitnesses hiding in outside the theater. Castro later captured a boat that was leased to this Collins radio and it was being used to ferry weapons to Cuba. So what they're saying here is this radio mechanic, worked for Collins Radio, worked on LBJ's plane, worked with NASA, who contracted with the CIA, and then a boat associated with the place he worked for was caught trying to bring weapons into Cuba for the CIA. And a TV reporter asked his wife, this guy Mather's wife, well, where was he and where was his car on the day of the assassination? And she said, well, his car should have been in the parking lot at work. Let's see here what this says. So the FBI knew of a look-alike of the accused assassin of the president near the scene of the murder of a Dallas policeman, who he's also accused of killing. Sitting in a car, this look-alike, belonging to a close friend of the victim, a friend who was employed by Collins Radio doing work on LBJ's plane at the same time. And you cannot make this stuff up. It is convoluted. It's a Gordian, not a crime, and conspiracy, and what the heck. In June of 1964, Kilgallen again confronted LBJ in her column. She asked for increased law enforcement in New York City. She's accusing him of not providing the law and order stuff he's always promising. She said, I just say what I think. I criticize everyone. She reported on a hotline that existed between Washington, D.C. and Moscow, and that this hotline had been cut 3 separate times by a farmer in Finland several days before the assassination, kind of implying that it would interfere with communication about nukes. She got the scoop on the Warren testimony about Jack Ruby. She got it before LBJ did. This was a federal investigation, the Warren Commission. How did she get her hands on that? Surveillance was started by the FBI anyway, of those closest to her. They said, we were stalked, our phones were tapped. This is her hairdresser. Readers were shocked when they did see eventually what she released about the Warren Commission interrogation of Ruby. They were shocked by the inept questioning of Ruby by Justice Warren and the failure to follow up on leads. Ruby begged 8 times to go to Washington, D.C. and testify publicly, and said he was afraid to stay in Dallas. There were op-eds nationwide about her information and the lack of response. Ruby swore he didn't know Tippit, but he knew every single Dallas cop. He was always down there. He knew them all by name. It was obvious that the Earl Warren Commission was aware of all the talk that was going on about conspiracy, and Ruby denied that he was involved in a conspiracy. But he did not deny meeting with Tippit. But he said he didn't know Tippit. So, it's what? Bernard Weissman, who published an anti-JFK paper in Dallas on the day that that Kennedy was assassinated, he met with Ruby, and he met with Tippit and Ruby together, and then another person. We don't know who that was. Ruby claimed that he shot Oswald to spare Marina the grief of trial, that he feared for his life and the safety of his family. He called attorney Tannehill a liar, who was making claims. On the day of Oswald's death in the morning, Ruby was in a newspaper office demonstrating the game Twister to employees. This does not sound like a troubled man. He claimed that the Birch Society was doing a smear campaign on him. He begged for truth serum and a lie detector test. He swore he wasn't part of a plot. Mark Lane, who's done a lot of writing about this, is the attorney for Oswald's mother, told the Warren Commission at a meeting between, this is what he told them, at a meeting between Ruby, Tippit, and Weissman and a rich oil man, this unknown man. And there was some conversation had, but he wouldn't talk, Mark Lane would not reveal his sources. He wouldn't talk about it further. Ruby claimed, I am being used as a scapegoat. If I'm eliminated, there won't be any way of knowing I'm the only one who can bring out the truth. Ruby feared being associated with the plot and kept telling everybody he was afraid of them. He didn't go into detail. Meanwhile, the Warren Commission, they were furious about the leaks, and they were mad at Kilgallen. And she said she'd rather die than reveal the source of her information. Ugh. Belly, the lawyer, accused her of destroying the integrity of the Warren Commission. Belly implied that John Daly, the host of What's My Line, was the leak. He was Earl Warren's son-in-law. He was married to Justice Warren, the head of the commission. In 1964, Kilgallen returned to Dallas and told people this place is full of crazies. She was not loved by the local powers to be in Dallas. August 23rd of 1964, she had a new exclusive. She found a private Dallas Police Department report on Kennedy that contradicted the public statements that the police department had made. That the chief had been calling on the radio right after the shooting, checking out something on an overpass in front of the motorcade. Shots in front of the motorcade. Didn't mean quite. Later, said that the shots all came from the back, from the depository. He said he ordered it surrounded and searched right away, but that's not true because there's proof that he was worried about the overpass. Also, 5 hours before Oswald was shot, the police department got a call for 100 to storm and take him. That there was going to be like a January 6th event at the police department. Because of this call, there was elaborate security around the building, the police department building in Dallas. Not inside of it, but around it. How did Ruby get in? With a gun. The depository did not get sealed off immediately after the shooting, even though all these people claim they saw shots coming from there. Anti-Kennedy pickets were arrested as part of the plot right out of after the shots, but then they were let go. So, like a distraction. Kilgallen got access to internal documents. She wasn't afraid to expose the Dallas Police Department and revealed their incompetence, and this garnered further public distrust of the police department. She single-handedly laid out the foundation for all the conspiracy theories that followed. She had the goods on that. It was significant that the shots from the front, it was significant that the shots were coming from the front, and here's another little tidbit that supports that notion. Roy Kellerman, a Secret Service agent who was in charge, said, "We thought we were driving into an ambush." He challenged the Warren Commission's report on the number of shots. He said Kennedy was shot at least 4 times and Connolly 3 times. That's not what you hear. Special operations in charge in Dallas also said that they believed the shots came from the front. Paul Landis, the assistant special agent in charge, testified under oath that Kennedy's headshot came from the front right, exited the back. Tom Johns, a special agent in charge to the vice president, he reported under oath that the first two shots came from in front, the grassy knoll. Dave Powers, who was 10 feet behind Kennedy, also testified they felt like they were riding into an ambush, that at least 2 shots came from the front, the grassy knoll, but he was pressured by the Warren Commission to change his story. Kenny O'Donnell said 2 shots came from in front, from the picket fence, somebody behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll. These are all Secret Service agents testifying to this. Actually, Dave Powers and Kenny O'Donnell were in Kennedy's entourage. People who worked with him. Recognize their names. I don't remember the specific job they did. Okay. Kenny O'Donnell confided to House Speaker Tip O'Neill, quote, "I told the FBI what I heard, but they said it couldn't have happened that way and that I must have been imagining things. So I testified the way they wanted me to. I just didn't want to stir up any more pain and trouble for the family. Everything wanted this thing to be done." Police officer Bobby Hargis, the motorcycle cop, said the shots that killed Kennedy were right next to me. And there's a graphic description of what the shot did to Kennedy and how that got all over the motorcycle cop. It's gross. He ran to the grassy knoll, and he said about 100 spectators also ran in that direction, chasing somebody into the parking lot. The motorcycle cop behind him was also spattered, and it's really gross, and I just wrote gross. I'm not talking about this. Okay, let's see here. Gordon Arnold, who happened to be standing near the fence at the back of the grassy knoll, had just completed basic training in the military, which included experience with being under fire with live ammunition. He was filming the motorcade passing by when he felt a bullet pass behind and near his left ear at the time of the fatal shot to Kennedy's head. Earlier, as he tried to stand closer to the overpass to get a good view, some man claiming to be with the CIA told him to leave the area. So Arnold walked east toward the grassy knoll. After the shooting, a supposed CIA agent immediately confronted him and demanded, then confiscated his film, which likely would have provided potentially clearer images of the assassination than that of Abraham Zapruder. One Dallas cop testified the shots came from an overpass. Another hysterical witness said the same thing. They weren't unidentified. The Secret Service agents used the words "they said." Later, it was claimed that there were unidentified Secret Service agents behind the depository. And, of course, that was denied. Some guy that they stopped by the grassy knoll, they showed his ID and was let go. Secret Service officially said that the first agent sent to investigate was 20 minutes later to the depository. Like I said earlier, it wasn't surrounded by security. It wasn't locked down because they claimed that's where the shots came from. Some of them did. And people came and went. There was no security for a good 20 minutes before anybody showed up to be serious about it. It's a known fact. This says that the CIA routinely carried Secret Service ID. The trajectory of the throat shot seems to be from the bushes in a tunnel under the overpass, and there are pictures here of what that is exactly. So people said it came from the overpass. Actually, there was a tunnel running under the overpass, like a walkway, and it was very dark, and you could easily, if you were a marksman, you could hide there and shoot, and it was a perfect place. And there is a photo of a bullet hole in the windshield of one of the limos, and it came from the front, and this has been confirmed by forensics. Both agents in the front of the limo duck. You could see them like they're avoiding shots. They duck. The Secret Service cleaned out the car in the hospital parking lot. Crime scene. They cleaned it out. The Ford plant in Detroit replaced the windshield. The old one was destroyed. The hole was 100% verified. The original windshield was broken up and scrapped. The neck wound was from the front, from the overpass. The depository, 3 out of 4 doors were not sealed after the shots. And shortly after the shots, 3 men ran from the north side and got in a car. Remember, there was that car waiting. They got in a car. Kilgallen reported on disappearing witnesses. They would give initial interviews and then never be heard from again, or they completely disappeared, or they died strangely. And there's just a series of strange deaths. It's just unbelievable. Or their testimony was changed, or they just didn't talk to the Warren Commission. Witnesses were ridiculed, derided, not believed, impugned, misogynistic things were said about them. Their words were changed. The president's doctor was never interviewed. And this is so interesting. He never talked about it. He never wrote about it. And even in 1996, his daughter was afraid to talk about it. There are many weird deaths. For example, Giancana in 1975 was supposed to testify to the Church Commission. Now that's the Assassination Committee that was investigating the Warren Commission, reinvestigating the Kennedy assassination, amongst others. And he was supposed to testify about the mob and the CIA, Giancana, and he was shot 7 times at home. Then there was the weird death of Mary Pinchot Meyer in the fall of '64, the ex-wife of a high-placed CIA agent, Cord Meyer, the alleged girlfriend of JFK, a regular visitor to the White House, shot execution style on a well-traveled walkway, like an exercise path, in Georgetown in October of '64. A 25-year-old black man who was fishing nearby was arrested. There were no forensics. The only witness was a guy who was a former Pentagon member, and his address was a CIA safe house, and he disappeared. You just can't make this up. The gun was never found. She died 3 weeks after the Warren report came out, when she started telling people she didn't believe it, that it was a cover-up. The Warren Commission was a cover-up. Incidentally, her brother-in-law was Ben Bradley of the Washington Post. He had covered up a CIA break-in at her house after her death, where they stole her diary. He stayed silent about it for 35 years and finally admitted it after 35 years. The black man who was arrested, the one who was fishing, he was acquitted. When we start chapter 10, I have a little more time. I have to go do something. I think we can get through chapter 10. Love with the proper danger. Kilgallen had an affair with Ron Pataki, a younger journalist with whom she confided things about her book and her project on Kennedy. Was Pataki involved in Kilgallen's death? This is the million-dollar question. We'll talk a little bit about him. He had a tumultuous childhood, a violent father. He went to 14 different schools by the time he went to high school. That's a mind blower. He was accepted to Stanford, hotbed of CIA activity, by the way, at the time. He got into the ROTC, but then he got kicked out. When he was kicked out, he lost his scholarship. Then he got arrested for drinking and having a fake ID and attacking a bus. Then he mysteriously left the country. Stanford is where the CIA began the MK Ultra stuff, and they started it the year that Pataki enrolled. They worked at 84 different colleges on this, by the way, and they recruited students, and he would have been the perfect disaffected student. They cultivated students to spy on each other or to take dangerous assignments. Pataki was not a good student because he was too social. He was a malingerer. He would fake health issues to get out of doing things. He was described as amiable. He understood what made people tick. Too social to be a good student. These are quotations. In 1958, he finished his undergraduate work at Ohio State because Stanford didn't want him, and he got a master's in journalism. Then he worked on an ambulance, a scoop and run ambulance. They didn't use EMTs in those days. He got a job as an entertainment writer, and from 61 to 85, he was technically an entertainment writer in Columbus, Ohio. He never got syndicated, so he was a local reporter. Yet he traveled extensively, even foreign travel, for his Columbus, Ohio work. And who was paying for that? He crossed paths with huge numbers of celebrities and was friendly with them to the point where they knew him by name. He was good at gaining confidence, and the CIA is known and admits to have used writers in just this way. Under the auspices of traveling for work, they could be anywhere and they could try to report on people, which gave them a foot in the door, and they were the kind of people who were charming. And the question is, did he charm Dorothy Kilgallen and then kill her for the CIA? I'm not alleging anything. This is the question that has been asked. He appeared on local TV. The show host was Nick Clooney, George Clooney's father. He was an aspiring songwriter. Kilgallen helped him get a song published. He sang like Jerry Vale. Al Martino did his songs. In June of 64, he had met Kilgallen. She called him Bean, as in lima bean, green bean, Bean Pataki. They met on a press junket to Europe for 20th Century Fox. He targeted her, that's allegedly in the book, on the plane to Europe, and they shared a ride to the hotel. He was a ladies' man. He was 29. I believe she was in her 50s. Well, yeah, 64. She was in her 50s. He claimed later that he knew her better than anybody else. It was not a physical love affair, he said, that they never spent time in a hotel. Her confidant, hairdresser, disagrees with all of this. He's the guy who discovered her body and was never questioned by the police, and he's got quite a bit to say, which we'll get to farther on. There's actually a note to him from her that was found that said they were going to meet at our little spot. He said that they would flirt, and other witnesses said she spoke romantically about trysts with him, and that it was a rebound from her long-term relationship with Johnny Ray that had ended. So we've got a charming, flattering younger man who seems to have plenty of discretionary funds to travel to Europe on a whim, and known for his ability to charm people. And he suddenly shows up at her elbow, this woman who's on the rebound, who the CIA is trying to keep an eye on, the FBI is surveilling, who's a public figure, who's reporting and stirring up the pot about the Kennedy assassination being more than its official story reports. This guy, as we're later going to find out, has a very checkered past, really alarming. But that's to come in the next few chapters, and I'm going to end video 5 here because I have to go do something on schedule. And by the time this is over, I will have recorded video number 6 and probably 7, and it'll be the end of the book. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying this. And once again, I apologize that some of these threads get tangled up, but they just do. This is a knot that has never been fully unraveled. So thank you for watching, and Slán go fóill, slánte.